Would that approach even work? Christian Whiton is a former State Department senior advisor, now principal with the D.C. International Advisory. And it's great to have you, Christian.
Great to be here, Jamie. Thanks for having me.
Well, I watched the speech. I watched everything all week. Personally, I've never heard this question asked, so you're the lucky one in the chair for me to throw it to, and I think you're just the right person. Look, if Iran continues to insist that their nuclear ambitions are peaceful, and everybody else around the world pretty much thinks otherwise, why has the IAEA or anyone else ever said to Iran, present to us the number or percentage of nuclear power you are using for peaceful purposes, and some check to see if the amount of nuclear power they're producing is increasing, which would at least substantiate their claim they're using nuclear power for something else? Has that ever been asked?
Not that I'm aware of, but frankly, the IAEA may have thought that that would be a redundant step, since we've caught them doing things, or the IAEA has caught them doing things that can only be steps for a nuclear weapons program, not nuclear energy. I mean, they found them with stolen nuclear weapons designs. They're working on explosive lenses that you need for the plutonium bomb and other steps that really have no application whatsoever for nuclear energy.
But how can you really evaluate the extent to which their ambitions have, where they are basically at this point, and what the true threat is, without also having that other component of nuclear energy being provided in other places? Because there's sanctions in place for the bad stuff. Why don't they defend themselves by giving that information? Are we even entitled to it, or is the UN?
I think we're entitled to it because this is a regime that is extremely dangerous. It is awash in oil and yet has this unexplained nuclear program. I mean, if you have access to other sources of energy, really is this necessary? And also, you know, throughout this, we've seen a pattern of deception. So I think it's completely incumbent upon Iran to explain and be transparent about what they're doing. And of course, they are not doing that. And if you look back at the intent of this regime since 1979, when it came to power in a revolution, you know, one of the first steps was taking U.S. diplomats hostage. They've made war on us through proxies in Iraq, kidnapped hostages through proxies like Hezbollah in Lebanon. Really a dangerous regime. So the benefit, the onus of doubt, I'd say, is on them, and they are not really doing a whole lot to assuage the concerns of Israel, but also, frankly, of the United States and other Western nations, Gulf states.
No, Christian, great point. I guess on a week where we're talking about transparency, getting information right, and telling the American people the truth, I just was curious if our folks that are in charge of overseeing this concern are asking the right questions. Let me ask you about the Prime Minister and his discussion and, in fact, his board and diagram and red line. Effective?
Yeah, I don't think so. You know, the problem Israel has, I think it's completely understandable from their point of view, but a lot of their messaging sounds very similar to what we heard in the Bush administration in 2007 or 2008, warnings that Iran was about to be at a critical stage of their nuclear weapons program right before the 2008 election and now before the 2012 election. You know, the big news, the takeaway, I think, from Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech was that he has moved the critical deadline to spring or summer. That's when he said Iran would be able to dart to a nuclear capability without being detected. But what that will be interpreted as is basically the previous conventional wisdom that Iran was definitely going to strike, that Israel was definitely going to strike Iran probably before our presidential election. That's out the window. Now the new timeline is spring or summer. But frankly, there's some of us who doubt that it will ever be the case, that Netanyahu may have just concluded that the risks are too high and Israel won't actually strike Iran.
Well, Christian, put in perspective what Benjamin Netanyahu said with the fact that one of the ministers, an Israeli minister, the foreign minister actually, said that more sanctions are called for. How effective have the sanctions been? Is the timing right to put in place more of them to at least delay the need for Israel or even the United States to respond militarily?
And the problem with sanctions is they just aren't working. There are other things that are working that have bought a lot of time. There's a sabotage program that is probably being spearheaded by the Israelis, but we may be involved as well. And this caused things like centrifuges, uranium centrifuges that operate at extremely high speeds and require extreme precision in manufacture to explode. Things like this. This was all reported, of course, in a book by a New York Times reporter with leaked information. The chairman of the Intelligence Committee, Dianne Feinstein, in the Senate, saying that she learned more from this book than in briefings from the intelligence community. That's another topic. So those things are effective. Sanctions, less so. Our own intelligence community has concluded that these sanctions are not stopping the Iranian program.
Okay, you have to hope that in the conversation our president had with Benjamin Netanyahu, whatever intelligence the prime minister has that lead him to the conclusion the bombs are coming potentially sooner was shared. And that we all react appropriately. It's definitely a threat. Christian Whiton, always great to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jamie.
All right, a lot of news to cover and much more when we come back after a quick